welcome to the first video on my channel. Thanks for tuning in. This series is going to be a plot breakdown and is in no way meant to be an alternative to the original. I strongly recommend that you go and listen to the Dolls of New Albion before watching this, or at the very least, listen to it afterwards. There's so much nuance and beauty in the original work that I'm never going to be able to capture just by talking about it, so yeah. That said, let's get right into it. Dolls of New Albion is the first in a series of concept albums by this guy, Paul Shapira. Paul is a composer, writer, singer, songwriter, and all-around wacky fellow. On his Bandcamp, which I'll link below of course, he has 47 albums released between 1998 and the current year of our Lord 2023. Many of these albums take place in a shared fictional city known as New Albion, filled with all sorts of reality-distorting hijinks. Fans of Shapira lovingly dubbed this album-spanning narrative the Shapiraverse. Move over, MCU, we got a contender for ya. Albums in the New Albion series are often flavored with punk style. Think the Atom Punk aesthetic of the Fallout series or the Frost Punk aesthetic of, well, Frost Punk. There are a few other works of Shapira's that, as far as I can tell, aren't strongly tied to New Albion, such as Cthulhu the Funksicle or Slender Man the Musical. Yes, those are real. If you're from the New Albion Discord Society and know something I don't, feel free to correct me in the comments. I'm open to it. For now, I'm going to be focusing on what I consider to be Paul's magnum opus, the New Albion Tetralogy. By the way, tetralogy means 4. Starting with The Dolls of New Albion, a steampunk opera, segueing into the New Albion Radio Hour, a diesel punk opera, and then The New Albion Guide to Analog Consciousness, then finishing with The Room Beneath New Albion. Way to keep us on our toes with the naming convention there, Paul. In this specific video, I'll only be covering the Dolls of New Albion, and we'll try to avoid side tangents relating to the expanded lore as much as possible. Again, make sure to go check out Paul Shapira's Bandcamp in the description. He can also be found on Spotify and Apple Music if you're more the subscription service type. Okay, now let's talk about the Dolls of New Albion. There's not much to say about the overture. It's pretty par for the course for a musical or opera. It establishes the general, haunted vibe and musical motifs that we'll hear for the rest of the album. We begin with a little origin story for the city of New Albion. To keep things simple, a gambler and a monk are traveling together and they start arguing about philosophy and stuff. Well, they decide that in order to settle the argument that they'll play a game of cards, as you do. And they just keep playing for a long time. Starts as days and then devolves into months and years. The city sort of begins to spring up around them as people traveling along stop and watch this incredibly intense years-long game of cards. Anyways, New Albion becomes a fully fledged city. Our omniscient narrator, Katie, who is voiced just beautifully by Kaylee McKnight, may I add, gives us a little auditory tour of the city. There's a one-eyed dwarf running the mafia, zeppelins fill the sky, and there's this gang of alchemists that steal young girls' dreams and turn them into pearls. Cool. But they're not the main character of this act. Annabelle McAllister is. She's the sweet young college burnout who will be casually attempting necromancy. You see, she was kicked out of school for snagging bodies to conduct research on. But right before this, she meets our main man Jasper. They kiss, have a little fling, and she is head over heels for this dude. Then the school came and they're like, "You been nicking cadavers?" And she was like, "Nah, psh." And they're like, "Yeah, okay, you're expelled." Then, to add insult to injury, Jasper dude got married to someone else. She's heartbroken. And then he dies. Double heartbroken. And that's where we find her now. In her lab, attempting to bring this Jasper guy's soul back from the beyond and put it in a life-size mechanical doll. Can you already see the ethical concerns here? Anyways, around 3 in the morning, it works. Jasper is back from the dead. Well, kind of. His soul is now encased inside an inanimate robot-like doll. Instead of being able to talk, the doll, which we'll just call Jasper, can only tune into radio waves. This is super important for later, so pay attention. Despite this being a literal man-made horror beyond all comprehension, Annabelle is ecstatic to have her one-day college boyfriend with her once again, against his will. Wow, this is really messed up. She takes him out for ice cream, gets him flowers, and parades them all around town. And everyone, pretty reasonably, thinks she's nuts. The whole time, Jasper is trying desperately to communicate with Annabelle. Apparently the afterlife in this universe is really dope, and Jasper just wants to go back. Annabelle is too caught up in her own glee at having a stiff robotic lover to even begin to listen to him. And then even Katie, our narrator, tries to get Annabelle to listen. Short side note here, the narrators in these albums often take an active role in the narrative and skirt the line between being in the story and existing as an outside observer. Finally, Jasper is able to fully express himself to Annabelle, or rather, Annabelle stops being a selfish little creep and is able to listen to what Jasper has to say. He sings to her about the pains of living and how he just wants to go back to Elysium. Elysium is essentially the afterlife. Annabelle is then left with the choice: cling to her newfound happiness and cause her one true love to suffer in a body that is not his own, or end it now so that Jasper can find peace. So Annabelle from childhood was just absorbed in her studies. She never had any room for friends or love. Jasper and the night they shared together in college is the one source of intimacy in her life, and she didn't want to let go of that. I mean, can you blame her? She continues to lament about her sad stuff before finally deciding to dismantle Jasper and set him free. Back to Elysium you go, little buddy. I'm sure you'll get to stay there this time. And if you're expecting some sort of happy ending for Annabelle, she doesn't get one. Sorry. She just packs up all her necromancy work in a box, marries some dude, and has a kid. Truly a tragic ending for such a brilliant scientist, but that's only the first act, baby. Going into the second act, there's a pretty big time skip. Annabelle dies when her son Edgar is 10. Status of father? Unknown. Typical. Edgar develops his own unhealthy love obsession in the form of a young woman named Faye. Oh, like mother, like son. This isn't super important to the story, but I love the little side characters that the act intros give to us. The one-eyed dwarf had a son who at some point stabbed him and took control over the mafia. There's also a cat burglar who is terrorizing the town. Everyone thinks it's just one dude, but in reality, it's two 18-year-old girls, their pet albatross, which is a bird in case you didn't know, and get this, a hyper-intelligent mouse. Again, not super plot important, but these little details really help to build the strangeness of the world we find ourselves in here. Anyways, Edgar and Faye are dating for a while, and Faye decides that Edgar kind of sucks. They go out on this fancy dinner date, and Faye just dumps him in front of everyone. Edgar manages to hold it together on the outside, but he's obviously pretty messed up over it. Heartbroken, lamenting, Edgar decides it's the perfect time for a nostalgia binge. While rummaging through his attic, he finds his mother, Annabelle's, old trunk of family heirlooms. He finds his grandmother's glass eye, a single ballet shoe for some reason, a child's dress. Nothing catches his fancy until, boom, Annabelle's formula for raising the dead. Edgar, after decades, has uncovered his mother's dark past, and boy howdy is he ready for some necromancy. Of course, this formula for bringing back the dead works, and Edgar sees a golden opportunity to impress his ex-girlfriend, Faye, who by now is shacked up with this guy named Psylocke. And what better way to do this than by becoming a disgusting capitalist pig? It starts out small. He takes a small fee, raises a client's family member from the dead, and puts them into a mechanical doll and sends them on their way. Obviously, many citizens of New Albion were eager to reconnect with their past loved ones, and Edgar saw success and wealth just skyrocket from there. Just like in Act 1, Katie comes in to give him the same warning she gave his mother, but Edgar can't hear her over the sound of all his stonks going up. So Edgar is now this super successful business dude. He has his own corporation. Things are going smooth for him, sure, but he still wants more. He wants Faye back. So he did what every reasonable billionaire does. He utilized violence to further his own self-interest. Yeah, he straight up orders his lackeys to go to Faye's boyfriend's place and just destroy all his stuff and take all his money, so he's just a total wreck. I think we can all agree that Faye is like a super smart cookie for seeing the red flags and dipping out when she did. Anyways, Faye is summoned to Edgar's house. He's like, you notice how your boyfriend is like a total loser and he's super broke? Well, I'm not, and she doesn't buy it. Like I said, she's a real smart cookie. But Edgar has a ridiculously evil card up his sleeve. Well, if cards could be evil, it's a metaphor, just listen. Surprise, Jasper, who is apparently Faye's dad, yeah, that's a plot twist you didn't see coming, is alive once again, now presumably in one of Edgar's dolls. He uses this as blackmail. If Faye wants to hang out with her dad, she's got to marry him. That's incredibly sick. She flips her lid on him. I mean, just totally goes off. But unfortunately, the prospect of being with her father again sort of overpowers her fear and hatred of Edgar. She agrees to Edgar's terms. They're wed, and they have a son. And you know what that means? Yeah, that means it's time for Act 3. Another big time skip here, all the way to the next generation of New Albion. Remember those two girls and the bird and the super smart mouse? Yeah, well, they ran off the dwarf's son, and now they run the mafia. From cat burglars to mafia warlords. Truly girl bosses of the century. More importantly, we meet Byron, Faye and Edgar's son. He inherits Jasper from his parents and, for whatever reason, doesn't know that Jasper is his grandpa, and he falls in love with the doll. Well, this wouldn't be an epic sci-fi tetralogy if there weren't at least a little unintentional incest, right? Anyways, these dolls that Edgar sold were apparently so affordable and accessible that literally everyone in New Albion has one now. They're absolutely everywhere. As a result of this horrific blending of death and life, a new religious cult appears in the city, and they're known as the voodoo punks, and Byron is their de facto leader. They're anti-establishment, pro-drugs, they do magic and witchcraft, and most importantly, they're obsessed with the dolls. Amelia is Byron's best friend, although she's not super okay with that. She's in love with Byron, but again, Byron's too preoccupied with his dead grandma to pay her any peace of mind. So the voodoo punks throw this huge party/rally, and they're all doing drugs, partying, having a good time with their dolls. Byron talks about how much he hates his daddy and how their movement is the bridge between living and dead, and then proceeds to give the most harrowing political speech of all time. He proposes that, since the system is stupid and broken anyway, why don't they just elect Jasper to be the new mayor of New Albion? I'm pretty sure that Byron knows that a doll couldn't actually be mayor, but he's actually putting Jasper in the running as some sort of salient political critique. The voodoo punks just go nuts for the idea, And what follows is by far my favorite song of the entire album. It's simply titled Voodoo Punk. They dance and sing and do this elaborate ritual to call forth these beings called the Seed. At least I think that's how you say it. And before making this video, I genuinely had never looked into what the Seed were. I just kind of listened to the tune and wrongly assumed that it was all gibberish to pad the music. But the Seed are actually these like mythical Celtic creatures. They're kind of like fairies or elves from, you know, more popular, well-known mythos. They live in these big underground fairy forts. They're typically associated with like the forces of nature and stuff. Lots of future lore stuff to unpack with that, but again, that's for a future video. Anyways, after the party, Amelia laments over her one-sided love in a really sad but sweet moment, and Byron's still on his ghost mare grind set. This time, he rallies the broader citizenry of New Albion to preach to them the efficacy of electing an inanimate object with a soul trapped in it to be their next mayor. And now he's getting serious about it. He's basically like, look, both parties are just gonna take your money, tell you what to do, but this guy's literally a doll. He can't oppress you and stuff, he just kind of sits there and plays music. He also makes the point that all the young people in New Albion are already partying with the voodoo punks, so like it's only a matter of time before they, you know, have enough influence and stuff. Then the voodoo punks set Jasper up on stage so that for the first time the political pundit can address the public. Remember how Jasper can only like play radio signals, can't really talk? Well, he's been collecting like little bits and pieces of these radio signals to create his own song, which is cool. And Jasper sings to the audience. Surprise, surprise, he really just wants to go back to the afterlife. He sings this song that really just boils down to being dead is so much better than being alive. All the dolls in New Albion also hear it, and they're like, yeah, dude, I miss being dead. Why would you bring me back? And they all also start singing Jasper's song alongside him. So the song is now playing all over the place. Here's where things start to get pretty dark. I'm going to be mentioning the act of sewer slide, so if that makes you uncomfy, just skip ahead a bit, mute the video, take a break, whatever you need to do. Amelia is really moved by the song. She's being abused by her father. Her one true love doesn't love her back. She takes Jasper's song to heart and she ends it. When her sewer slide note is found, it's just the lyrics to the song that all the dolls in town have been singing nonstop. And this is obviously incredibly worrying to the inhabitants of New Albion, and there's now a growing fervent hatred of the dolls. Byron goes to give another speech, trying to, you know, quell the flames a little bit, but he unintentionally sparks an outright riot against the dolls with the very poor choice of words, "Your kids are all dancing each night with the dead." Which, to be honest, is in really bad taste considering recent events. The outraged mob just combs through the city streets, collecting every doll they can find, and they destroy them by tossing them in this big bonfire. So, like, happy ending for the dolls, I guess. Well, except for Jasper, because, you know, he's just got to suffer more. Byron risks his life to dive into the bonfire and pull him out. And that's where Act 3 leaves. Kind of a bummer, but no worries. Paul lightens the mood here with a jaunty little tune that revisits our friends from the start, the gambler and the monk. It's pretty much the same story, but we finally get some insight on how the game ends. Just as the gambler is about to make the winning play, ending this seemingly endless card game, his heart gives out, and he begins to pass away. Despite the monk still being alive, with his dying breath, the gambler swears that they will both be back to finish their game. I wonder if that specific detail has some deep plot implications we should pay attention to. Then our favorite narrator, Katie, comes back to lay the scene. Once more, we skip forward in time a whole generation. After the events of the third act, rising unrest and a growing shared sentiment poised against the dolls in New Albion causes the city to fall into a sort of authoritarian police state in which the dolls are completely outlawed, and if you have one, you and the doll are dead. And then we're introduced to Priscilla, daughter of Byron, who is presumed to be dead at this point. And lo and behold, Jasper is chilling with her now. Bro could have been hanging out in the afterlife, like drinking a ghost cocktail or something, but instead he had to watch his daughter get blackmailed, his own grandson fall in love with him, that's awkward, and his home country succumb to fascism. Guy's got it rough. Anyways, Priscilla and Jasper are hidden away in their little room, and get this, they're playing a never-ending game of cards. Thank you for that one, Paul. That's really good. Anyways, they're at this game for a long time, and can you believe it? Jasper wants to unalive. The only reason he doesn't is because he loves Priscilla so much. Priscilla doesn't really understand why he wants to go back to the afterlife. You know, she's alive right here. She's like, what could be better than us getting to be together? Quite the optimist for an orphan child coming to age in a dystopian fascist hellscape. Meanwhile, a new soldier has been trained for the doll grinder. Soldier 7285. He'll be important for later. So basically, Jasper stays alive only for Priscilla. Priscilla starts to realize that he's given up so much of his own happiness, sacrificed his peace. Her ultimate conclusion is that it's time for her to sacrifice something for Jasper's happiness. He can't go on living with her, and she can't go on living without him. She calls the police and reports herself for harboring a doll. And don't you worry, Soldier 7285 and his merry men are on the case. Jasper begs Priscilla to get the funk out of there so she doesn't unalive alongside him. But she's like, nah, it's good. See you in the afterlife. And the soldiers burst in and gun him down. But one soldier didn't shoot. Our dear friend, Soldier 7285, had his heart touched hard. He just saw how much they loved each other, and he couldn't bring himself to pull the trigger. Soldier 7285 has this big emotional journey. This moment just Mario jumped on his whole worldview, straight flattened it. All the lies and the brainwashing this fascist regime put him through, his core humanity just pulls on him till they snap. And then he just becomes a full-on old-school anti-government populist. He he vows that he will bring the regime down. And Katie comes back to directly address us, the listener. She's like, listen, there's gonna be a revolution. It's gonna be super messy, but oh damn, look at the time. Guess you should listen to the sequel. And if that sounds as exciting to you as it did to me, well, first, go listen to it. It's totally worth it. Then you should subscribe. Stick around. Like this video so more people can see it, and support me so I can make more. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one where I'll be explaining the New Albion Radio Hour. Bye.